Andrea Lauren Andy DelVesco was born on June 29, 1994, in Chicago, Illinois, to Arthur and Leslie DelVesco. From the start, Andy was electric, bright, curious, fiercely loyal, and always moving. She had a deep love for animals, especially dogs and turtles, and her passions ran wide: art, music, photography, writing, great food, and long, meaningful conversations. She soaked up life with both hands, and when you were around her, you felt it. After graduating St. Andrew's Episcopal School in Austin, Texas in 2012, she headed to UCLA, majoring in psychology and Spanish. She had a natural empathy and a passion for Latin culture. Andy was supposed to be in court for drug-related charges on September 25, 2015, for allegedly possessing controlled substances for sale. It had been weighing on her. Some of her friends later admitted she'd been scared about what would happen, scared about who might retaliate, because in the world of drug distribution, people at the bottom of the chain, especially if they're seen as vulnerable or likely to talk, can quickly become a target. But 4 days before that hearing, around 5:30 a.m., a UCLA student named Sarah Murr was just getting home to her apartment on Roebling Avenue. Her boyfriend had called an early flight, and as she was unlocking her door, she noticed a man coming down the stairs. He was wearing a red and blue tank top, jeans, and a baseball cap. It struck her as odd, enough that she called her boyfriend. Then she went to sleep. About 45 minutes later, Sarah was jolted awake by the sound of a woman screaming, shrill, terrified, and the whimper of a dog. She called 911. That call captured more than just her words. In the background, you can hear it, a woman's voice, panicked and pleading. The operator told Sarah that officers were on their way, and they were. 4 LAPD officers showed up, 2 rookies and 2 veterans. Sarah explained what she'd seen and what she'd heard. She even pointed out the unit below hers. "That's where I think it's coming from," she told them. But what happened next still raises painful questions. The officers looked around the outside of the building. One of them reportedly shined a flashlight into the window of what would later be identified as Andy's bedroom. No one in bed, he said. They didn't knock. They didn't try the door. And in less than 7 minutes, they were gone. Sarah watched all of this from her window. No one told her anything. She tried texting people in the unit below. No answer. She even called out, "Andy?" But it was silent. Then came a loud crash. She ran to her balcony and looked down. Smoke was billowing from Andy's apartment, and that same man, the one from earlier, was jumping off the balcony and sprinting away. She dialed 911 again.
Just called the cops about a girl screaming, and I just saw the guy who was in there run out of her room, and it looks like her room is on fire.
Her room's on fire? Okay.
I don't know, there's smoke coming from everywhere. Oh my God,
okay.
The whole thing is...
Okay, ma'am.
The whole apartment is on fire.
Inside, Andy's roommates, who had slept through the earlier screams, were now waking up to the smoke alarm. One remembered seeing Andy curled up in bed, blood on her neck and shoulders, motionless. They called her name but couldn't reach her. The fire had already taken over the room. Firefighters arrived quickly. It took 32 of them about 15 minutes to get the flames under control. What they found inside was devastating. Andy's body was on the bed, so badly burned that she was initially identified as a Jane Doe. Her parents wouldn't know the truth until dental records confirmed it. The autopsy showed she'd been stabbed 19 times, wounds so deep they severed both carotid arteries. She likely died before the fire was ever set. At the foot of her bed, Shay Panda, her sweet dog, was still alive, but barely, severely burned and struggling to breathe. He was rushed to a vet, but had to be euthanized to end his suffering. An arson expert later testified that a trash can had been emptied on the bed and set on fire. There was no doubt the fire was deliberate. 2 suspects were eventually arrested: 22-year-old Alberto Medina, a Fresno State student, and Eric Marquez, 23, who lived just steps away from Andy's building and was a student at UCLA. That night, the 2 had burglarized an apartment across the street. Prosecutors believe Medina then broke into Andy's apartment, murdered her, and set the fire to cover it up. Marquez stayed outside, helped clean up, and disposed of stolen items. Police later found evidence in Medina's Fresno apartment: a bloody knife, women's underwear believed to be Andy's, and other stolen goods. But what ultimately led them there was something almost too bizarre to believe. Medina had given stolen speakers to a friend, who then re-registered them online. When police tracked him down, the friend admitted Medina had asked him to do it. Medina eventually confessed to being at the scene, but tried to shift the blame onto Marquez. Both were charged. Medina was convicted of first-degree murder, arson, burglary, and animal cruelty. He was sentenced to life without parole. Marquez took a plea deal and served less than 3 years in prison. Andy's family was shattered. Arthur and Leslie DelVesco tried to understand what had happened during that first 911 call. Why hadn't the police done more? Why didn't they even knock on the door? But when they started asking questions, they were stonewalled. "We were rebuffed," Arthur said. "We were made to feel like asking was inappropriate." Eventually, 2 officers, Rodell Sudduth and Alicia Williams, were fired for mishandling the initial response. Their attorney claimed they acted reasonably, that Sarah's call was vague, and there were no signs of forced entry. He said they'd considered knocking, but decided it wasn't necessary. Sarah strongly disagreed. She'd been clear she'd heard screaming. And after the fire, when she ran outside and told one of the officers she was the one who had called earlier, she asked if they'd knocked. He told her no. Andy's body was so badly burned that her family was never able to see her one last time. They've praised the homicide detectives who worked tirelessly to bring her killers to justice. But when it comes to LAPD's accountability, they still feel like they've been left in the dark. "We'll never know if she was still alive when that first call came in," Leslie said, "but we do know the fire hadn't been set yet. That means we might have gotten to say goodbye." Jordan Russell Davis was born on February 16, 1995, to Lucia Macbeth and Ron Davis. He was full of life, sharp, confident, passionate about music, and like a lot of 17-year-olds, just starting to figure out who he wanted to be in the world. But on the night of November 23, 2012, the day after Thanksgiving, Jordan's voice was silenced over something as trivial as loud music. That evening, Jordan and his 3 friends, Tommy Storns, Leland Brunson, and Tevin Thompson, were riding around Jacksonville, Florida. They stopped at a Gate Petroleum gas station on the corner of Southside Boulevard and Bay Meadows Road. Just 4 teenagers running in for gum and cigarettes, music blasting from their red Dodge Durango. At the same time, 47-year-old Michael Dunn, a software developer from Satellite Beach, had just left his son's wedding with his fiancée, Rhonda Rauer. They were on their way back to their hotel nearby and stopped at the same gas station to grab a bottle of wine and chips. Dunn pulled his black Volkswagen Jetta into the spot right next to the teen's SUV. As Rhonda headed inside, Dunn stayed behind, and the music, the bass thumping from the SUV, immediately got under his skin. Rhonda would later testify that as she walked toward the store, Dunn muttered something like, "I hate that thug music." He would later try to soften it, saying he actually said rap crap. Either way, it was clear he had a problem. The boys were listening to Beef by Lil Reese, Lil Durk, and Fredo Santana. Dunn rolled down his window and asked them to turn it down. Tevin Thompson, sitting in the front, turned the music off, but it didn't stay off for long. Jordan, sitting in the back seat, pushed back, told his friend to turn it back up. That's when things escalated. Voices were raised. According to Dunn, Jordan cursed at him. He claimed he heard the words cracker or white boy. He also claimed that Jordan showed him a gun, but no gun was ever found. Not in the vehicle, not at the scene, not anywhere. Police, witnesses, and forensic investigators all confirmed there was no weapon. Still, Michael Dunn reached into his glove compartment, pulled out his handgun, a weapon he legally carried, and fired 10 shots into the SUV. He shot through the rear passenger door where Jordan was sitting. 3 bullets hit Jordan. 1 pierced his aorta. As the boys tried to escape, Dunn stepped out of his car, took a tactical stance, and continued firing as the SUV backed away. The boys sped to another parking lot, desperate to get away and help their friend. Jordan was gasping for air. Within moments, he was gone. Meanwhile, Rhonda came back to the car to find Dunn calm, collected, and ready to go. The 2 returned to their hotel. They ordered pizza, had some drinks, and watched movies. At no point did Dunn call 911. He never reported the shooting. Early the next morning, they drove 2.5 hours back to their home in Satellite Beach. That's when Dunn claimed he saw a news story on his phone that Jordan had died. He said he vomited from the shock, but again, he still didn't call the police. Instead, Dunn was arrested later that day after a witness at the gas station gave police his license plate number. When investigators searched the SUV, they found no weapons and no sign that a gun or even a stick, as Dunn would later claim, was ever involved. A forensic team determined that even if the boys had tried to hide a weapon, there was no way it wouldn't have been immediately found. Dunn told a very different story.
What he and I do is basically try to just gather all the facts of the case. Believe me, you're much nicer than most of the people we end up talking to.
The music starts, and I rolled down my window, and I thought it was like, I asked them nicely and demanded it. I said, hey, would you guys mind turning that down? The guy that was in the back is getting really agitated. You know, there's a lot of him, that, and that, you know, I thought they were singing, like, you're gonna die. I was like, you talking about me? And then she's like, you're dead. You're dead. They had a shotgun aimed at me, and I'm in bricks. But that's when I reached in my glove box. I'm an avid, you know, gun guy and all that. And so quicker in a flash, I had a round chambered in it, and I shot. It was fight or flight. I was going to get shot.
He claimed Jordan got out of the car. He claimed he saw a barrel pointed at him. He said he was terrified, but his own fiancée, called to testify as an adversarial witness, said he never mentioned seeing a gun that night.
Spirits because of what had happened at the wedding.
Because the son was married.
Yeah.
In the time that you and Mike have been together, have you ever known him to become pretty hot-headed about things?
He gets very passionate about things. He'll raise his voice.
What are some things that get him passionate?
Well, politics.
Politics?
Gun control.
What other type of music does he have a problem with?
He doesn't like rap.
Is it the bass that drives him crazy?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe it was just the loud bass. I was handing her my money,
Mm-hmm.
and the sounds happened again. That's when she said, that guy's got a gun. And I turned around, and all I could see was Michael. I opened the door, and he said, get in the car. Get in the car. He just had that sound in his voice, you know, of urgency. Yeah. When we get to the hotel, as I thought, what happened was wrong.
All right.
And if the police officer saw this, he's going to be here, and I've got to prepare myself for this. In my head, I'm thinking, you know, you stupid ass. What were you thinking? Why, you know, would you do this? I don't know what he was thinking.
Right.
But what I was thinking was, a stupid thing had been done. Right now I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be arrested too.
Okay.
Because I left the scene of a crime. Horrible. It was a horrible trip home.
Right.
And so, no, I didn't want to hear anything.
I just want to make sure we're clear. He never describes a gun that anyone in the truck has at him.
No.
Or any other weapon.
Or any other weapon in the truck.
He didn't indicate that there was a weapon.
At trial, prosecutors didn't buy it, and neither did the jury. In February 2014, Michael Dunn was found guilty on 3 counts of attempted second-degree murder for firing at the other boys in the SUV. But the jury deadlocked on the charge of first-degree murder for Jordan's death. A mistrial was declared on that count, but prosecutors weren't done. In October 2014, Dunn stood trial again, this time just for Jordan's murder. He took the stand in his own defense, repeating the same story, that he feared for his life, that Jordan had threatened him. Prosecutor Erin Wolfson dismantled that claim piece by piece. She reminded jurors that Dunn didn't fire warning shots. He aimed directly at Jordan Davis, with both hands on the gun. The jury agreed. Dunn was convicted of first-degree murder. Judge Russell Healy handed down the maximum sentence, life without parole for killing Jordan Davis, plus 3 consecutive 30-year terms for the attempted murders of the other boys, and another 15 years for firing into a moving vehicle. Before sentencing, Dunn addressed the court. He said he regretted what happened. He called himself mortified and said he wished he could roll back time. Whether it was justified or not, he said, "I'm mortified I took a life." But Jordan's parents didn't hear remorse. Ron Davis, Jordan's father, said the old Ron Davis died that very night with Jordan. He remembered kissing his son for the first time in the hospital when he was born, and for the last time in the funeral home. Lucia, Jordan's mother, wasn't moved either. She said she saw no humility in Dunn, only emptiness, and that's what he'll carry for the rest of his life. Katharina K. Reitz Brow was born on September 8, 1931, in Mainz, West Germany, to Ludwig and Maria Reitz. By 1980, Kay was 48 years old, living a quiet life with her husband Charles in a modest trailer home on Rosewood Avenue in Ayer, Massachusetts. Just weeks earlier, she'd survived a heart attack. She was home recovering, trying to regain her strength. But on the morning of May 21, 1980, her life was taken in one of the most brutal ways imaginable. Between 7:10 a.m. when her husband left for work and 10:45 a.m. when her daughter-in-law Eugenia discovered her body, Kay had been stabbed more than 30 times. 5 of those wounds pierced her heart. She was also beaten with a blunt object, likely a ceramic lamp found bloodied inside the home. Her small frame lay crumpled on the bedroom floor, fully clothed and surrounded by signs of a struggle. Her home had been ransacked. Her purse was gone, along with jewelry and a large sum of cash she kept hidden in the linen closet. The faucet was still running in the kitchen, and a paring knife, later confirmed to be the murder weapon, was found in the trash can. Kay's murder shocked the community. She'd been a familiar face in town, a former employee of Bemis Bag Company in nearby Pepperell. She was known as kind and hardworking, the sort of person who didn't deserve an end like this. 2 years passed with no arrest. Then, in October 1982, police arrested Kenneth Waters, a 29-year-old local man who lived nearby and worked at the Park Street Diner, where Kay was a regular. Kenneth always said he was innocent. On the morning of the murder, he had an alibi. He worked the breakfast shift and then appeared in court at 9 a.m. for an unrelated matter. He said he was in the courthouse with his attorney until after 11 and then returned to the diner. There were no blood stains, no cuts on his body, and fingerprints from the scene didn't match his. But police didn't let it go. 2 ex-girlfriends, Brenda Marsh and Rosanna Perry, gave statements after hours of interrogation, statements that would ultimately help convict him. Brenda initially denied Kenneth ever confessed, but changed her story after police allegedly threatened to charge her as an accessory and take her kids away. Rosanna, too, initially said she knew nothing, but after 3 hours of questioning and threats, she claimed Kenneth had once mentioned stabbing a woman and stealing money. Kenneth was tried in 1983. Prosecutors leaned heavily on those statements, despite key forensic evidence excluding him. Hairs found in Kay's hand and on the murder weapon didn't match her or Kenneth. Fingerprint records that could have exonerated him were never shared with the defense. He was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. But his younger sister, Betty Ann Waters, refused to believe it. She made it her life's mission to prove his innocence. Over the next 18 years, she put herself through college and then law school, all to fight for her brother's freedom. Eventually, she teamed up with the Innocence Project. In 2000, they located crime scene evidence that had been preserved and secured court permission for DNA testing. That test changed everything. The blood found at the scene, originally thought to match Kenneth's type O blood, was from a male, but it wasn't his. His conviction was officially vacated on March 15, 2001. Kenneth walked free after nearly 2 decades behind bars. For the first time in years, he was able to live. He found a job, reconnected with his family, and embraced a world that had changed while he was locked away. But the celebration didn't last. Just 6 months later, in September 2001, Kenneth slipped, hit his head, and died at the age of 47. Betty Ann later said Kenneth had the best 6 months of his life. For years after Kenneth's exoneration, Kay's case remained unsolved. But investigators didn't give up. In 2022, the cold case unit of the Middlesex County DA's office turned to genetic genealogy. Working with Parabon Nanolabs, they isolated a genetic profile from the original crime scene evidence. That led to 2 deceased brothers as potential suspects. With the help of living relatives who voluntarily provided DNA samples, scientists at Bode Laboratories made a breakthrough. The DNA belonged to Joseph Leo Boudreau, a longtime Massachusetts resident born in Natick in 1943. He'd been convicted of armed robbery in New Hampshire in 1975 and moved to Ogunquit, Maine in 1987. He died in 2004 at the age of 61. Investigators found no link whatsoever between Boudreau and Kenneth Waters. On June 27, 2024, more than 4 decades after Kay's murder, authorities announced that Boudreau had been conclusively identified as the man responsible. Though Boudreau can't face trial, the truth matters. It clears Kenneth Waters' name completely, and it brings long overdue answers to a family that's waited 44 years to know who killed Katrina Brow. Justice doesn't always look like handcuffs in courtrooms. Sometimes it looks like the truth rising up after decades of silence. Katrina Renee Seaburn was born on October 3, 1994, in Clearfield, Pennsylvania, to Thomas and Tammy Seaburn. She grew up in Kerwinsville, where, from the time she was little, Katrina stood out for her athleticism. By 22, she was a senior at Clarion University of Pennsylvania. She was majoring in accounting and had just days left to finish her degree. She was on track to graduate with honors that spring. Katrina was a regular on the dean's list and active in several honor societies, including Phi Eta Sigma and Kappa Kappa Psi. She was a dedicated member of the accounting club and had built a reputation on campus as someone you could always count on. But what truly made Katrina shine was her baton twirling. She wasn't just good, she was world-class. A champion twirler since childhood. She earned dozens of titles over the years, including regional, state, and international wins. Katrina also attended the Kerwinsville Alliance Church and remained deeply rooted in her hometown values, hard work, faith, and family. She lived with her mother and her mother's life partner, William Holt, and was close to both of her parents. On the evening of March 1, 2017, Katrina was in her car with her boyfriend, 23-year-old Damian Ditz. They were parked near a trailer in the Lake Lucy area of Washington Township, Clarion County. The couple was in the middle of an argument, reportedly over $130 Ditz had loaned to a friend. In the heat of that moment, Ditz pulled out a .45 caliber Glock. The gun discharged, and Katrina was shot and killed. At first, Ditz told police the gun had simply fallen off the dashboard and gone off. Later, he claimed he picked it up to move it to the back seat and accidentally fired it. Over the course of 3 separate interviews with Pennsylvania State Police, his story shifted again and again. It wasn't until a 7-hour interrogation, about 3 months later, that he finally admitted he had fired the gun, though he still insisted it was not intentional. The case went to trial in December 2018. Clarion County DA Mark Aaron argued that Ditz shot Katrina in anger and then lied repeatedly to protect himself. Aaron emphasized the inconsistencies in Ditz's statements and the fact that he changed his story 3 times. His defense attorney, Adam Bishop, admitted his client fired the shot, but insisted it was a tragic accident, not murder. The jury, made up of 7 women and 5 men, deliberated for nearly 4 hours. In the end, they found Ditz guilty of 3rd-degree murder. He was also convicted on charges of aggravated assault, simple assault, and reckless endangerment. He was found not guilty of 1st-degree murder. He was ultimately sentenced to 10 to 20 years in state prison. He also received 1 to 2 years for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon to be served concurrently. The judge ordered him to pay over $12,000 in restitution, which included funeral and victim compensation cost. He was given credit for 582 days already served and required to submit a DNA sample and undergo mental health, drug, and alcohol evaluations. Katrina's murder devastated her family, her university, and her hometown, but her memory continues to inspire. In her honor, a scholarship was created to help other young students pursue their education. Her future was stolen from her by a senseless act of violence, but her light hasn't gone out. It continues to burn in the lives she touched, and in the fight to make sure no more promising lives are lost to domestic violence. Tiffany Jaylene Sabourin was born on October 7, 1984. By the time she was 13, she was living in Wentzville, Missouri, a bright, spirited girl with a rebellious streak and a heart for softball. She loved math, cracked jokes easily, and wasn't afraid to speak her mind. She was sweet, sharp, mischievous, and full of energy, like she had something electric running through her. But on April 26, 1998, her life came to a brutal and senseless end. That weekend, Lindenwood University was holding its annual Parents' Weekend. The campus was buzzing, students giving tours, families chatting over coffee, just another warm spring Sunday in Missouri. But that peace was shattered just before 7 a.m. A student walking to his job at Pizza Hut passed Commerce Bank on First Capitol Drive when something in the grass caught his eye. At first, he thought it was a mannequin. It wasn't. Police arrived at a horrifying scene. In the grassy patch between Lindenwood's iconic white water tower and the bank's drive-thru lay the partially nude body of a young girl. She'd been sexually assaulted, stabbed multiple times, and her head was missing. Even veteran officers were shaken. The campus locked down, roadblocks went up, bloodhounds were brought in. Her missing head was discovered a few hours later inside a portable toilet near the soccer fields. More than 40 officers worked the case, and speculation spread like wildfire. No one knew who she was. She had no ID, no connection to the school. Hoping someone might recognize her, detectives took great care in taking a photo of her face without showing the trauma and releasing it on campus. But no one on campus recognized the girl in the picture. Just as they were preparing to release the image to the press, the phone rang. A woman had seen the news. Her daughter was missing. The description matched. The girl in the grass was her 13-year-old daughter. Tiffany was a 7th grader at Wentzville Middle School. That weekend, she'd been staying at her mother's boyfriend's apartment, babysitting her younger siblings. Her stepmother, Kathleen Higgins, later said Tiffany had a magnetic charm. You could see it in her smile, hear it in her laugh. As fear gripped the Lindenwood campus, detectives worked tirelessly, and then a breakthrough came. Investigators brought in 2 dogs, Chester from Michigan and Samantha from Indiana. They retrieved clothing from Tiffany's school locker. Chester picked up her scent and followed it from the El Matador apartments, where she'd been staying, to Fremmer Pond. Samantha was taken out on a boat and lunged toward the water in the exact same spot. Divers were sent in. What they pulled out chilled investigators. A blood-soaked bedsheet weighed down with rocks. Despite heavy rains, the sheet was intact enough to photograph. It had a distinct pattern, tan with dark brown circles, resembling feathers or bird wings. Police aired the photo on the evening news. Within 30 minutes, they had a tip. Jason Richter, a student living in Cobb's Hall, was watching the news with his girlfriend when he saw the sheet and recognized it. Most of us had plain sheets, he said, but that one stood out. He turned and looked at his roommate's bed. Same pattern. His roommate, 21-year-old Jason Shipman, and he hadn't been seen since the morning Tiffany's body was found. Richter called his father, who confirmed that Shipman had those exact sheets back home. But now the flat sheet and pillowcase were missing. Richter made the call to police. Forensics processed the dorm room, and the picture came together quickly. Shipman had officially withdrawn from the university that very morning. He was found days later, hiding out in a motel in Bridgeton. At first, he denied everything. Then he tried to pin it on a 15-year-old named Billy Joe Logston. Logston confessed, briefly, but his story collapsed under scrutiny. He was cleared and released, though not before spending nearly a year in custody. With focus back on Shipman, prosecutors offered a deal. No death penalty, in exchange for a full confession. He took it. Shipman told investigators that he'd been hunting on campus for someone to kill. His word. When no one crossed his path, he wandered off campus and ended up near the apartment where Tiffany was staying. She had stepped outside to smoke. They started talking. He asked her the time. She offered him a juice box. At some point, she agreed to go back to his dorm. They listened to music, hung out, then she said she needed to head home. He offered to walk her back. When they stopped again near the water tower to smoke, he made his decision. "I knew I was going to kill her," he later testified. Shipman assaulted her and stabbed her, first in the chest, then in the neck, paralyzing her. She begged him to take her to the hospital. She said she couldn't feel her legs, recalled Captain Patrick McCarrick. Instead, he mutilated her body, decapitating her to conceal evidence, and placed her head in a portable toilet on campus. He dumped the rest of the sheet in the pond. It was cold, calculated, remorseless. Shipman didn't fit the classic image of a killer. He was quiet, collected baseball cards, kept to himself, but there had been signs. He'd been caught peeping through windows, even evicted because of it. He'd fathered a child with an ex-girlfriend, but no one imagined he was capable of something like this. He pleaded guilty to murder, sexual assault, and related charges. He was sentenced to 3 life terms, plus 150 years. But for those who lived through it, the damage was permanent. Tiffany left behind 4 half-brothers, 2 half-sisters, and a grieving family that never stopped mourning her.